Hello, everybody. I think we're going to go ahead and get started. Thank you for participating in this public information session. This is the third public information session that we've had to give an orientation and update the public regarding redistricting work that's being done and that's currently underway. The objectives of tonight's public information session is to give you an overview of the process and the timeline and the work that we've been doing since the start of the project, and then also review options A and C. And you see that they are noted as draft. They will remain draft until the board approves a plan. So anything that we present to you will be draft and will remain draft until the project is complete and the board approves a plan. And then finally, once I give an overview of draft options A and C, we will discuss how members of the public can provide feedback on the options. We do have a survey that we've put out to solicit some feedback from you and have you give us some input regarding the options that can help inform us and help drive some changes to the map if it's a viable suggestion. A little bit about who we are before we get started. We are Cropper GIS Consulting. We're based out of Ohio, but we have our staff works in remote offices all over the United States. We do this kind of work all over the country. Our specialty is redistricting. We also facilitate community engagement processes and help districts with facility planning as well as doing demographic studies. So we have done some redistricting for Brunswick County in the last couple of years, as well as a demographic study. So we can build, this is basically a phase 2 of the project that's building on some of the work that we have already done. I am Matthew Cropper, have over 20 years experience doing this kind of work, and honored to be working with you guys as members of the public as well as the district on this important endeavor. So why is there a need to redistrict? Well, this is really part 2, phase 2 of a bigger plan. So phase 1 was where most of the changes occurred. We did look at the northern part of the county last year, and it ended in December 2019, actually, with the new zone for Town Creek Middle School, opened in fall of 2020. So the district has developed a set of criteria and objectives to help guide this process. We did all of the work in the north in phase 1, really around Town Creek in areas north of Town Creek. And we did not impact or look extensively into areas the remainder of the county, the southern part of the county. That's what brings us to today, where we are. We're looking at phase 2, which is basically identifying if any other adjustments need to be made in other parts of the county. And we're taking a comprehensive look at the whole county, but just to see if there's any adjustments need to be made to balanced utilization or aligned feeder patterns in the rest of the district. So what we have seen, just to give you an overview, we have not seen extensive changes needed in other parts of the county. There are changes that are being considered and being suggested in different options, but nothing to the extent of what we saw in phase 1. And I will go over those here in a minute with you. We do have some rules to follow, what we call criteria, as we start to evaluate options. And the best plan will be one that adheres to these criteria as best as possible. And these are, to the greatest extent, keep students at a neighborhood school. So be mindful of the distance that's being traveled to school, and as we still work to populate the buildings and balance the utilization. Also, to the greatest extent, keep maximum student numbers for high schools at 1,400, middles at 750, and elementaries at 600. This is kind of a target, some rough numbers for enrollment bodies, but also understand too that some buildings have differences in capacity. One school may have a lot more seats than another. So we're also looking at numbers of students, but then also focusing on the utilization of the building, how full is the building. And then keep average bus routes between 60 and 75 minutes. So try not to go over the time that is normally traveled on common routes in the county. And we have been working with transportation staff to do that. And some of the group has been around the table with us as we work with to develop options with the administration. I'm going to give you an overview of the process and just kind of walk you through the timeline and the process for redistricting. Our first step was to collect data. So we collected information back in September and October of 2020. A lot of information had already been collected since we did phase one, but we still collected current enrollment data. Also, the district is continuously evaluating their capacities. Capacities change because of the way programs are offered in schools, and moving programs around and different offerings may impact the capacity. So capacity was a new set of capacity numbers were provided for us. And it should be noted that we continue data collection through the whole course of the study. We don't stop. If there's new information that's being that can be provided, we certainly do that. Just perfect example is we're evaluating an alternative high school option, and transportation has given us a lot of extensive input, as well as reaching out to the police department to see information about traffic activity and things like that. So it's an ongoing process of collecting data. And if there's information that we need that we don't have, we'll always go out and get it. And we always take this data and we put it into our mapping system with our GIS. It's a mapping system that lets us tie a lot of databases and tables to a map, so we can count students on any street or any neighborhood. The county has really good GIS mapping for the property lines and things like that, and that helps us to accurately map students. So we really integrate all this data into our GIS mapping so that we can make informed and accurate decisions. One of the things that we do also is develop planning blocks, which are basically building blocks for redistricting. So you'll see here, if you look on some of our tools and some of our resources, you will see some information that looks like pink outlines. And those are basically small, what we call planning blocks. Each planning block has an ID number, and then below that, you can see a number, a label that shows you the number of students that live inside each planning block. And so that can be a useful tool, so you can understand how many kids live in the various areas that we are considering to move as we look at making redistricting adjustments. We have also built an interactive map. And so it's an online interactive map. Now, this map doesn't have the most recent option C on it yet, but it should be available either, if not this evening, it'll be available tomorrow. So you will be able to see the option C that I'm going to share with you in my presentation. But just to show you a little bit about the interactive map, when you go on here and you look at the map layers to view, you'll see the planning blocks. So if you see a plus sign, that means it can be expanded, and there's multiple options to label. So if you click the top box, you'll see the planning blocks will show up as outlines, and then the PB number is showing the planning block label. You can turn that off, and you could turn on, say, K5, and may need to give it a second to refresh. Let's see here. And then you'll see the labels that pop up that show you the numbers of K5 students. You could also look at 6th through 8th graders if you wanted to, so you could see how many 6th through 8th graders live inside the various areas, and also 9th and 12th. So this helps inform you at how many students live in some of these smaller areas that we're considering to move. And then it helps you understand the impact of redistricting as we work through this. Another thing I forgot to mention at the beginning of the session was you'll notice in your Zoom, there is a bottom where you can see so your toolbar for Zoom. There's a Q&A section in there. As I'm giving my presentation, if you have questions, feel free to type them in that Q&A, and I will look to field some questions after this presentation is over. And if we start to see common questions, we can even put it into more of a frequently asked questions document. So feel free to post your questions in the Q&A, and as I'm presenting, when I'm done with the presentation, we will help answer some questions if we can, if we're able to. So back to the process. The third phase is developing options, and we started this back in October, looking at developing a series of scenarios for the team to work with and start to evaluate. This internal planning team is really the group that's evaluating these options as we go through our review of these. This internal planning team is made up of central office administrators, transportation, communications, people who are in charge of programs and put in ensuring that the students are going to the right schools, as well as people who are in charge of facilities who have a handle on capacity and things like that. So we have a really well-rounded group that's working with our staff to develop and evaluate these options and give us feedback on them. And then the fourth phase, and one of the more important phase, is the committee and public engagement. You know, it's important to get input from the public as we work through this study. And so we have put things in place that we informed you at the first two public information sessions to give you a way to give us input. There's a general feedback form as well as surveys when we do these. And so it should be very, very helpful. We've given you tools to give us input, and we have received input from community members through the course of the study. So we do have a survey tonight that's structured to ask you questions about these options and get input from you regarding these options as well. School board action is expected to take place in March of this year. And so we're getting close to the end of our process. I think if you look at this timeline here, you can see kind of where we are and where we've come. We've had a series of public information sessions, and there was an extended public comment at the board education meeting in January. So here we are in February, given our presentation. And there's also an opportunity in March, on March 2nd. If you'd like, you can go to you can extend your comments to the board at their board meeting on March 2nd. So they're offering a period for you to express your comments and your opinions to the board at the March 2nd meeting. The presentation of the final recommendation, which will probably be one map, will be March 23rd. And then the board is expected to vote on a plan March 30th. And so we've come a long way since September, working on this process for about going on the 6th month of working through it, and coming to the end. But we still are evaluating maps as we finalize some of our thoughts. Oh, there was something that we wanted to touch on here, and this is regarding long-range facility needs. So one of the things that we had been tasked to do and asked was evaluate the facility needs. And we, as I mentioned, we did a demographic study back in a year or two ago and did a population enrollment forecast for you. So we have a good handle on the demographics and the long-term trends for Brunswick County. Using that as a guide, we've been examining long-term utilization and looking at all of your schools in the county to see where are the needs. Are there any needs that we have identified where the district needs to add space, where you can't do something like possibly redistrict, or demographics may not level out, where we see continuous increases and the school's already at overcrowding? You know, we may want to recommend extra space for you to build, but we want to make sure we like to operate conservatively when we provide recommendations. And so we don't want to recommend any space that we don't feel the district needs. So as we've been evaluating this and looking at the district, we looked at all of the schools and their capacity versus forecasted enrollment. And the one school that really stands out above all of them is North Brunswick High School. This school is expected to get over capacity by the end of our forecast. It's expected to really start to feel some pressures by 24-25. 23-24, 24-25, that's when we know that the students are in the system now. They're moving into the system, into the high schools. And so we are confident and certain that your enrollments are going to increase like we have anticipated. This poses a challenge for North Brunswick High School because you're going to be hitting around 96% when you get to that 24-25 mark. And that's really where we do see there being a need for additional capacity. So as we've looked at the entire district, this is the only area where we are seeing the need to add capacity. We have examined elementaries and middle schools. We do anticipate enrollments to stabilize in areas where it has been growing in the past. In other areas, we don't expect big upswings and large increases. We do expect more of a leveling off in your enrollment. Except for some areas in the north. North Brunswick High School is the one where we do identify a need for additional capacity. So we are recommending, as part of our work, that the district considers to add 300 to 400 seats to North Brunswick High School to avoid overcrowding and get you over that hump. We are considering also an option to potentially move some students to South Brunswick High School, which is about 100 students that will help further relieve some overcrowding at North Brunswick High. But if it really depends on if the district is adding seats, you may not need to look at redistricting. And if you're not going to add seats, and if you don't have a whole lot of time, and you can't do it in a more quicker manner, to meet this 24-25 timeframe, you may want to consider some redistricting. But like I said, North Brunswick High School is the one school where we are seeing some the need to expand. So 300, 400 seats. Now, we don't know if that's an expansion at the existing North Brunswick or if it's a brand new school with a larger capacity. We're leaving that up for the facility, the facilities folks. We're giving our recommendation as it relates to demographics and what we're seeing on students in seats and capacity at the schools. But to finalize this conversation on this, there are no elementary or middle school facility utilizations in the 10-year forecast window that can't be resolved in other ways other than adding capacity. And so there are no recommendations to add capacities to elementary or middle schools, just the capacity issue at North Brunswick High School. So we do have some updates since the last meeting. We do have 2 draft options and a high school option. I think we reviewed this high school option with you last time, but we're going to recap on them just so that you can see all the options and material that are on the table right now as we work through finalizing a recommendation. Before we get into maps and statistics, we do count students based off of where they live. So we're doing this based off of kids, how many kids live inside the area that go to Brunswick County schools. We are looking at 2019 and 2020 enrollment as we evaluate this, because 2020-21 is a strange year, and it's a strange year for, and any way you cut it, but it's also giving us some strange enrollment numbers because of what parents choose to do with sending students to school or keeping them at home. And so we are evaluating 1920 as well. I'm probably leaning a little bit heavier on 1920 data, to be honest with you, than 2021, particularly at the elementary school level, because I think elementary enrollment in Brunswick County is down about, 5% or something from last year. And a lot of that is due to COVID, in our opinion. We do expect some of that to bounce back as well. So let's get into the options here, and I'm going to show you these options. So these are the elementary options side by side. Last time we shared with you options A and B, and they look similar to this, but we have modified them. Option A has not changed. Option C is a variant of option B, so it's a modified option B. So what you'll see here are, I'm going to point out the commonalities that exist in both options first, and then I'll talk about how they differ. So the A and C option, one of the things that you'll see in both options is there's an area of Jessie May Monroe that we considered this in the prior maps that we shared with you. This area is still under consideration to get moved to Waccamaw K8. So this area right here that you see, the black outline shows you the current zones, and the background color shows you the option. So this area that's south of this bold black line and that's shaded in blue, this is the area that is currently in Jessie May Monroe for K5, But then these families, these kids go to Waccamaw for grades 6 through 8. What this does is this gives them a pathway from K all the way through 8th grade at the same school. And it avoids a small split of population. So Jessie May Monroe, a lot of these kids go to elementary at Jessie May Monroe, then they can continue to Waccamaw with the rest of their peers and finish out their middle school years. And so that exists in both options, and that's a pretty firm consideration, something that hasn't really changed a whole lot as we evaluate our options. Another thing that you'll see that's common in both plans that we have drafted right now is an area that is east of Middleton Road. So this is the St. James community that sits here east of Virginia Williamson and in between Virginia Williamson and Southport. This area is currently zoned to Virginia Williamson. And then what happens though is these kids, they go to Virginia Williamson, but then they go to South Brunswick Middle School for their middle school years. And so they get split off from Virginia Williamson from elementary to middle. So keeping in line with the mantra of trying to keep some clean feeder patterns here, we are looking at moving the St. James community south to Southport Elementary School, and then they would have a clean feeder all the way into South Brunswick Middle. The result of this would be all of Virginia Williamson feeds entirely into one school, and then all of Southport would feed into another school, and there would be no feeder pattern split. But those are the extents that you see in both maps, the St. James community area north of Jessie May Monroe. Now, these maps differ in one area, and this is where we're still contemplating and evaluating this, but you see between Union and Jessie May Monroe, in the A map, there is no change between Union and Jessie May Monroe. In the option C map, we are moving an area from Union to Jessie May Monroe in order to give Union a little bit capacity relief to balance utilization. And this is one, and I'll show you some more details of this when I zoom in on the map here and give you some more details of the location of this. But we are not picking up any of Ocean Isle Beach on this. All of Ocean Isle Beach would continue to Union where they currently go. And we're just looking at students north of the Causeway and south of the other major road, sort of a block of area to send some students to Jessie May Monroe to give Union a little bit of capacity relief. Let's see. So for middle school adjustments that are being considered are very minor. It's just one area that's being considered, and that's a small area here that goes, that doesn't continue, that they don't have the same pathway for elementary to middle school. So this area goes from, let me see. So this is the area that currently is in Charlotte Middle School, and they go to Waccamaw for K-5. But then the small area then goes to Charlotte Middle School for 6 through 8. So this just moves this yellow line, extends the line down to pick up those kids who are going to Waccamaw for K-5. They can extend and finish out their 6th through 8th grades at Waccamaw. And it's an adjustment to align feeder patterns and avoid a very small feeder pattern split. So that seems to be somewhat of a no-brainer in terms of the change and the effectiveness of the change for the children. So let's talk about high schools. So for high school, we are looking at just what we're calling high school option AC. And this is one that's still, it's labeled ABC-1. So this, what we have, and this is what the same thing that we talked about last time that we were looking at, is we know that we want to move some of these students from North Brunswick to South Brunswick to align with some phase 1 changes that occurred for a feeder pattern. But we are considering potentially moving more area out of North Brunswick into South Brunswick to give North Brunswick some capacity relief and to balance utilization. This is the Mallory Creek subdivision that would move from North Brunswick to South Brunswick if this ABC1 option were exercised. So we have reached out to get some feel for transportation. We have heard a lot from members of the public about the ABC-1 option and concerns about traveling and their children driving to South Brunswick High School, or just transportation to South Brunswick, period. So we reached out to the transportation office to give us some input and some research onto the impacts of transportation. I think if you look at the map, there's no question that it's closer to get to North Brunswick than South Brunswick. So transportation is definitely going to be less efficient if the ABC-1 option is exercised in terms of the overall impact on transportation. The transportation did give us some feedback, and they said that the drive time from Mallory Creek to North Brunswick is 12 minutes by car, and the average bus route time is 35 minutes. The time required to travel from Mallory Creek subdivision to South Brunswick High School is about 22 minutes by car. An average route time for buses to get to South Brunswick High School from Mallory Creek would be around 60 minutes. So it's probably, looking at about twice the distance, twice the time around that amount if this option were to be considered. They also provided some input on buses. There are 2 buses for the Mallory Creek subdivision with an average route time of 35 minutes to North Brunswick High School, and 1 could be moved to service South Brunswick High School, they said. And if moving 1 bus is not viable, then 2 buses would have to be added to the South Brunswick fleet. So we have had some input on from transportation. And we are evaluating this ABC-1 option as a potential. We are looking at what we have structured this leading up to this meeting, and I'm not sure how, if this does come to a recommendation, if it may change, but we were the last time we presented this to you, we said that this ABC-1 option should be considered when the North Brunswick High School enrollment reaches 1,400 students. So kind of a trigger effect. When North Brunswick gets to 1,400, then exercise this redistricting option to give them some capacity relief. But that is still up in the air. All of this is. So this is the one thing that we have heard the most about from feedback that we've heard so far from members of the public is those that are impacted in this ABC-1 option. We have heard from you, and we are listening to you, and appreciate the input that you've been providing so far. So I'm just going to do a little quicker dive into the map so that you could see them. And these are your current zones. And if I go to option A, you can see the area that I was talking about here. So we've got Jessie May Monroe here, and then these areas north of Jessie May Monroe. And see, just on the northernmost part of Jessie May Monroe are areas that you see off of Ash Little River Road and things like that are some of the communities that would be impacted in this adjustment that we have been considering in both options. This one does not have the piece that we had talked about moving in C, which you'll see if you look at option C, you can notice that we still have that Jessie May Monroe piece, like I said, but this is the difference here, and that we have extended the line, this blue line, to the current boundaries. We've extended the line all the way to the Ocean Isle Beach Road. And so this road right here goes down to the causeway. So everything west of Ocean Isle Beach Road would go to Union, and everything south of Georgetown Road and north of the causeway. This block right here is the area that we're considering to move to Union, from Union to Jessie May Monroe. And so that is something that is being considered. This does bring utilization. It kind of, the way as we're looking at it, it may not be as beneficial of a change, because this helps provide some capacity relief to Union, but then kind of maybe puts a little bit of a pressure on Jessie May Monroe. So this is one that we're evaluating. Not as strong of a thought on this one, just because it may not give us the benefits of moving students versus what we may see in utilization. The other piece is here is the Middleton Boulevard here runs north. And you'll see this is the St. James community that's moving into Southport. And this happens in both maps. And then if I look at the middle school map, you see that it just follows the same middle school line here. And so the middle school lines follow that adjustment that we had just made. And also, by the way, if you're looking at this, we do have, I think, a link for the story map, or we will provide a link for this presentation. If you want to interact with the map as you're looking through this, if you're looking at it at home, and when you do, make sure you push the Explore button, and that lets you interface with these tabs and lets you zoom in. If you don't click the Explore button, it won't let you interface with the map, zoom in, and things like that. And then, so let's talk a little bit about this high school draft option ABC1. And you can see here, I have it written that it's intended to be implemented to either option A or C if and when North Brunswick reaches 1,400 students. And so just zooming in here so you could see the area that we're looking at. This is the Mallory Creek subdivision here, and then we are just basically drawing along through the subdivision, but not cutting through the neighborhood and keeping the subdivision intact, but trying to take a decent enough number of students that's viable to give some capacity relief to North Brunswick High School. So let's see, we do have a couple of questions here. For one of the questions, and I'll just get to some of these questions because they're specific about the maps. And while I'm here, I'll go ahead and address some of these. So one of the questions is, can we discuss feeder pattern and fatalities on 133? I heard you say you've discussed with law enforcement. Please do not forget what you said earlier about capacity numbers at NBHS versus the 1,400 cutoff. And so we did reach out to the sheriff's department. They did give us some information on traffic incidents. They didn't give us information on fatalities. So we don't have any information on fatalities for this commute. But let's see here. Looking at feeder patterns, the feeder patterns would result, let's see, it would be an 84%, 16% feeder pattern split if this option were to be considered. And so that does create an imbalance in feeder patterns if this were to move. And this would be Leland Middle School would have about 84% of the population would go to North Brunswick, and 16% would go to South Brunswick. And so that's I believe that's the feeder pattern imbalance that you were referring to, or that you wanted me to touch on, where currently all of Leland feeds into North Brunswick entirely. And so it does create somewhat of an imbalance in feeders. 84-16, that's not an optimal split of feeders. And so if it's ideal to have more of a 50-50 split feeder split. If you can, getting like 15% or lower, that's when you start getting to potentially too small of splits. But we do see them from place to place. It doesn't necessarily negate the need to do a redistricting, but it's not a perfect scenario to have an 84-16 split. Another question is, what's the difference between Plan AB and then ABC1? It seems this needs to be like A, B, C, D. Okay, so these have been evolutions of maps. So what we have right now are just map A and map C. We didn't want to, sometimes we'll rename these when we get to this phase. to avoid confusion, but then that sometimes confuses other people who are tracking it. So we kept them the same naming convention. There's option A and there's option C. And think of this map right here as one that can fit with either map. So we have either the A and the C recommendation or the plan that we're looking at. And then this ABC1 is an AC1 contingency map, could be applied to either option. We kept this standalone so that we don't lose focus on details of the A and C option. And this is one that could carry forward with either option if the board chooses to do so. Then another question was, you greatly stressed feeder schools in regards to elementary school. Wouldn't moving Mallory Creek to South High School completely contradict this? Also, have you studied traffic patterns on River Road and amount of accidents? Can you please explain to me how one would get their child to South High School and one to Leland Middle on time? Okay, I think I touched on this in the prior questions about the feeder pattern splits. It does create a feeder pattern split, and so you are correct in identifying that as an inefficiency of this model. Traffic patterns, I don't have the information from the sheriff's office on hand on traffic incidents. They gave us a number of incidents that have occurred on this stretch of road. And so I'll take your question and then see if possibly expanding it and putting it into providing an answer at the on the web page after this session. Yes, so feeder patterns. So the other questions that have been asked have all been addressed regarding feeder patterns and things like that. So I think I've answered all the questions with that, but if you have any more, I'll revisit the questions when I finish my presentation as well. So our next steps are to give you, provide a survey for you. So we do have a survey in place now. That survey can be found on the Brunswick County Schools redistricting page. If you go there, there's a link to access this survey. And you can go on there and fill out the survey. Let me see. And we will have the survey live and it'll go all the way till February 21st. And so you have time to fill out the survey. There's links on the survey where you can provide some, you can look at some handouts and materials, look at some of the statistics that we've been looking at, and give us your opinion on the options. We will take and revisit and look at your input and finalize a recommendation as we get to that March session. Probably looking at that recommendation will come on March 23rd. It's possible that you may see the recommendation prior to that, or you may not see the final recommendation until that board presentation on the 23rd. We haven't really discussed those details yet. So like I said, this is what the survey looks like. You have a page where you can go to it, and there's links to the handout and also the online map, and as well as the district's webpage to get access to some of their materials. And that is about all I have for tonight. You know, we do have we've got some more time if you have any other questions. But if not, we just encourage you to fill out the survey, to go online, give us your input, tell us what you think, and we will share all this information with the board as we continue our work and work towards a recommendation. Let me see, make sure there's no other questions on hand, and I don't see any other questions. So I think that's all I have for today. So thank you again for your time. And we look forward to continuing this work with you and with the district. And we will see you again in March.